What is CDC? This is CDC right here. I've kind of put it in this crude little template so you can kind of see it. You have puffs, regular, extra select. So what is it? CDC is Cul-De-Canard. It's French for duck bottom. So if you want to get crude and joke with your friends, you can say, hey, I just tied you a fly with duck butt or goose butt. So it's been done before, so do it again. It'd probably come off pretty funny. What makes this feather special? So where this comes from is off the anus area of the bird. And there's a gland there called the preen gland, and there's another name for the preen gland that's urethrium something or other. I can't pronounce it. I'm not a scientist. I'm a fly tire. But anyway, so it comes from around the anus. And so what happens is oftentimes you'll see ducks and geese, they'll take their beaks and they'll kind of wisp around their butt and the anus, and what they're doing is they're collecting oil from the gland that's producing essentially a floatant. So anybody that cooks at home, hopefully you know that oil and water do not mix, right? Have you ever mixed water with oil? I mean, it can create a huge problem. It can create fires and everything else. It also, however, is essentially water resistant, or it's a waterproofing material. That's why we had oil paints going back a long time to paint houses and so on and so forth. So the oil protects the feathers, which are super wispy. And I had one here. But the feathers are super wispy, and they're, because of where they come from, the oils will create the buoyancy. And so as the duck or goose is cleaning itself, it's collecting that oil and putting that oil over itself or over the feathers, helping waterproof its feathers. So what's the difference? Okay, so you have puffs. Puffs are basically going to be on things of more of like midges, really small flies, because on a size 24, this feather's huge. And oftentimes you'll see the tips of this being stuck out of a bead or something like that. When you just go to the fly shop and buy regular CDC, it won't say anything special. It'll just say CDC, Cul-De-Canard, whatever color. This is, on average, the range of size that you're going to get. You're going to get some of this. You're going to get a lot of this, and probably very little of this. Why is this extra select? Well, it's kind of self-explanatory. So when you go to the fly shop and you want extra select CDC, the reason this CDC costs more is because of its size. Essentially, you can build more flies with fewer feathers. So a little history. Where the idea of using CDC first came about was sometime in the late 50s by a Frenchman named Harry Brinson. He was a professional fly tyer. I haven't done a lot of research on him, but he was probably a hunter as well, as most were back then, and still are to some degree to this day. And somehow or another, he found out about the properties of duck butt, and why it floats so well. It didn't become real popular until about the 1980s with the F-fly. The F-fly is a super simple CDC pattern that we're not going to cover in this particular session. But if you want to get into CDC and you don't want to follow the session, the F-fly is actually a really good pattern. It goes back to the early 80s. The guy that created that series of flies, his name is Margin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. He's from Slovenia, but it's Margin Fratnik. And he created the F-Fly series using CDC, which is, those flies are still used today heavily. So a little something for you to research if you want to. So anyway, that's what CDC is. That's what we're going to be learning about, and all of its different applications. Some of the more modern applications actually take this feather and use it for nymph patterns or wet fly patterns, because I know you can't really see it. I don't have a good enough camera, but off each one of these little arms or barbules, there's these individual little fingers that kind of come off of there. And when they're underwater, what they do is they collect bubbles. And so using these on like mayfly nymphs and caddis nymphs, which we're going to touch on a little bit during the session, they will collect air bubbles on them underneath the water, which gives a more lifelike representation to your fly, because that's what nymphs do. Like if you've ever seen videos on a mayfly nymph, if you haven't, go look one up and find some underwater footage, and you'll see little, their gills are along the side, or in the case of a midge, they're up front. They come out the front of the hook, is where their gills are. But you'll see little air pockets collecting on these, and that's how they breathe. And so this particular feather represents that in the water very well, which is also why it's partially also why it's expensive. The other reason is there's just not a lot to collect off of a duck or a goose. I've read that people may get as many as 50 off of a particular bird, and then also get as few as about 5 or 6. And so that's why this feather is so expensive at your fly shop. And they all kind of have a different purpose, right? So if you get the extra select, you'll probably get you'll get mostly this, you'll get some of this, you'll get less of this, and maybe a few of these. But they do sell puffs and bags if you're just into tying chromonoids and that kind of thing. So anyway, just wanted to do this video and kind of give you an idea of what it is we're doing, why it is a cool material, and yeah. So other than that, happy tying, everybody. Take care. We'll see you later.